You know, there's an old saying in international politics that's honestly a little terrifying when you really stop and think about it.
What is that?
It goes something like this. If you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu.
Oof. Yeah, that is a striking image, isn't it? It perfectly captures that anxiety of being a smaller player in a world of giants.
Totally. Are you making the decisions or are you the one being, consumed by them?
Right.
And that specific analogy, the table versus the menu, is, I think, the perfect way to jump into today's deep dive. We're looking at one of the most talked about, but maybe least understood acronyms out there, BRICS,
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
and a few others now, too.
And a few others, yeah. The
Huh?
family's getting bigger.
Right, the table is extending. But despite all the headlines, I feel like there's still so much confusion about what this group actually does. Is it some kind of military thing? An anti-American club?
Or just a photo op for leaders to shake hands and look busy. Yeah, it's easy to get lost in all that noise.
Exactly. So today we are grounding our conversation in a really insightful analysis. It's titled The BRICS Blueprint, Multipolarity and the South African Perspective, and it leans heavily on the work of Professor Noah Zerbe.
And I think it fundamentally changes how you look at this whole thing.
So our mission today is pretty simple. We're going to try and move past the scary headlines and the jargon. We want to understand the mechanics of it. Why does it exist? And, why does South Africa specifically care so much?
And what does it mean for a regular person?
Yeah,
Or, as the source puts it, go-go, the grandmother just trying to get by.
that's the key. This isn't just about abstract foreign policy. It's about the architecture of the world we're all living in.
It really is. So, where should we start?
Okay, let's unpack this. First things first, we need to define the beast. When I hear BRICS, and I think a lot of our listeners are in the same boat, it's easy to imagine some, Eastern version of NATO.
Right. Tanks, mutual defense treaties.
A real them versus us mentality. Is that what we're looking at?
No. And that is the single biggest misconception. We need to just debunk that right out of the gate. BRICS is absolutely not a military alliance.
Okay.
There's no BRICS army. It is not a formal treaty organization like NATO, where an attack on one is an attack on all. Nothing like that.
So if it's not a military bunker, what is it?
Think of it more like a diplomatic club, a high-level forum. The source material frames it really well, actually. It says it's a place where these major emerging economies get together to coordinate their vibe on global issues.
Coordinate their vibe. I like that. It sounds less like a war room and more like a strategy session at a coffee shop.
In a way, yeah. But the stakes are global. The
Yeah.
core concept here, and this is where Professor Zerbe's analysis is so helpful, is something called multipolarity.
Multipolarity. Okay, that's a $5 word. Break that down for us.
It sounds complex, but it's not, really. For a long, long time, especially since 1945, the world has kind of revolved around a single center of gravity.
Right. The United States and Western Europe, they wrote the rules for trade, for finance, all of it. A unipolar world. One pole.
We've been living in a solar system with only one sun. Multipolarity just means the world is finding more than one center of gravity.
So instead of everything orbiting that one sun, we have a few different stars with their own gravity, their own pull.
Precisely. And Professor Zerbe makes a really crucial point here. This isn't necessarily a clash of civilizations. It's not about destroying the old center. It's about making sure the rules of global finance and trade aren't written exclusively by the same few countries that have been in charge the last 80 years.
Which brings us right back to that seat at the table idea.
Exactly. And this is where the South African perspective gets really, really interesting. Because if you look at the original 5 members, South Africa is kind of the outlier.
Right, just on the numbers, you have these absolute giants, China and India, massive economies like Brazil and Russia,
Okay.
and then South Africa. It's the smallest member by GDP by a huge margin.
A huge margin.
So why is South Africa there? Did they just get lucky?
It's definitely not luck. It is pure strategy. South Africa plays a very specific role that gives it leverage far beyond its economic size. It's the gateway.
The gateway to Africa. We hear that phrase a lot, but what does it actually mean in practice?
Well, think about it from the perspective of, say, a Chinese company or a Brazilian agricultural firm. You want to do business in Africa, it's the next great growth frontier. But the continent is fragmented. Laws change from border to border.
It's tricky, so they need a base camp.
Exactly. And South Africa has the soft infrastructure. It's got a sophisticated legal system, a world-class stock exchange in Johannesburg, deep banking liquidity. It serves as that strategic entry point, the hub for the whole continent.
So South Africa is essentially saying, if you want to talk to Africa, you talk to us first. We're the bridge.
That is the leverage. And notice how that dynamic changes with the recent expansion, this BRICS Plus idea.
Right, the source mentioned new members like Egypt and Ethiopia.
Which is so significant because it shifts the whole identity of the group. It stops being just an exclusive club of 5 countries and starts looking more like a representative body for the global South.
It's building a bigger table.
And filling the seats with diverse voices from the Middle East, Africa, you name it. It gives the group a kind of legitimacy that 5 countries alone just couldn't claim.
Okay, so that's the who and the why. But I want to talk about the how. Because when people hear about these global summits, I think there's this tendency to imagine, a shadowy cabal of leaders smoking cigars and carving up the world map.
The reality is much less cinematic, I'm afraid. It's really a bureaucracy for development, and a slow one at that.
Why slow? I mean, I thought some of these leaders could just snap their fingers and make things happen.
That's the irony. BRICS operates on a consensus-based model. Nothing happens unless everyone agrees.
Everyone. So if China wants to do something and South Africa says no, then it just doesn't happen.
Correct. It's not a hierarchy where the biggest economy calls all the shots. It's based on mutual respect. Now, that makes the process deliberate, sometimes frustratingly slow, but it ensures every member feels their sovereignty is respected.
Which is a huge contrast to some Western institutions where the biggest donor gets the biggest vote.
It's a stark contrast. And it proves this isn't just, China's fan club.
Okay, but let's get tangible. Because while the diplomacy is slow, they have built something real. The source material calls it the brick and mortar of the group.
The NDB, the New Development Bank.
Right.
This is probably the most concrete thing to come out of BRICS. And to understand why it matters, you have to understand what it's providing an alternative to.
The World Bank and the IMF.
Exactly. For decades, if a developing country wanted to build a dam or a highway, they almost always went to the World Bank.
And the World Bank it's the bank. You go there because that's where the money is.
It is. But that money often comes with what's called conditionality, strict political advice.
The strings attached.
So many strings. We'll lend you this money, but you have to cut public spending, or you must privatize this industry.
The golden handcuffs. Here's the cash, but now we own your policy decisions.
The New Development Bank is different. Its focus is on infrastructure and sustainability, but with far fewer of those political strings attached. It's designed to respect the policy space of the country that's borrowing.
So it's more like, here's the loan for the bridge because the bridge makes economic sense.
Yes.
Not, here's the loan for the bridge, but first you need to change your entire tax code.
Precisely. It treats the borrower like a partner, not a subject to be reformed. It's about development, not ideology.
This feels like a good moment to pivot. We've been talking high-level diplomacy, GDP, banks, but I want to bring this right down to the ground. The source material uses this great persona, Gogo.
The grandmother, the matriarch.
Right. Gogo isn't worried about multipolarity. She's worried about whether the lights stay on, whether her grandkids have jobs, if her pension is going to cover the groceries. So why should Gogo care about BRICS?
That is the million-rand question, isn't it? And the answer really lies in that infrastructure we were just talking about.
Connect the dots for us. How does a bank in Shanghai help Gogo in Soweto?
Okay, so South Africa, like a lot of developing nations, has these huge constraints. Logistics, power. The reality ports are clogged, railways need upgrades, the energy grid is under so much strain.
To put it mildly, we all know the frustration of load shedding.
And these bottlenecks, they kill jobs, they make everything more expensive. The NDB funding is vital because it targets exactly these kinds of projects. Major energy projects, transport solutions.
So for Gogo, BRICS matters because the NDB could fund the power station that keeps her lights on, or the railway that gets maize to the store more cheaply, which keeps food prices down.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
It's not just diplomats shaking hands. It's actual funding for the things that make an economy work. But there's another layer to this that hits your wallet even more directly.
This is the currency discussion.
Yes, this is where we talk about de-dollarization.
Okay, let's break this down, because de-dollarization sounds like something out of a spy movie. What does it actually mean for us?
Well, traditionally, if South Africa wants to sell wine to Brazil, that trade is often priced in U.S. dollars.
So South Africa has to buy dollars with rands, then use the dollars to pay Brazil, and Brazil then converts it back to their own currency.
Exactly. You're adding a middleman to every single transaction, and every conversion costs money. But it's worse than that. You're also at the mercy of the dollar's fluctuation.
Right. If the Federal Reserve in Washington does something with interest rates, the RAND often takes a hit.
Precisely. A decision made in Washington, D.C. can make fuel more expensive in Durban. What BRICS is pushing for is trade in local currencies. South Africa pays in rands, Brazil accepts in reais.
Just cutting out the middleman.
It reduces costs, it makes our exports more competitive, and that ultimately helps the local economy grow. It stabilizes our currency, which protects GOGO's purchasing power.
It's fascinating how these huge geopolitical shifts actually trickle all the way down to the price of bread on the shelf.
It is all connected. Financial sovereignty sounds abstract, but it hits your pocket every single day.
Now, I have to address the elephant in the room. We said BRICS isn't a military alliance, but the media often frames it as a challenger to the West, a rebellion. Is BRICS trying to overthrow the whole system?
This is where we need to lean into Professor Zerbe's nuance again. The goal, according to his analysis, is reform, not rebellion.
And what's the difference in this context?
A rebellion would be trying to, burn down the IMF or destroy the World Bank. BRICS isn't trying to do that. They're not saying end the West. They're saying we need a plan B.
A plan B.
Yes. For a long time, the global financial system was a monopoly. You had one option. If you needed a bailout, you went to the IMF development cash, the World Bank.
And as we know from any Econ 101 class, monopolies are usually bad for the consumer.
Exactly. If there's only one grocery store in town, they can charge whatever they want. BRICS is trying to provide another option in the global marketplace.
So it's about balancing the scales.
Correcting the tilt. That's the phrase the source uses. For decades, the global scales tipped heavily toward the global north. BRICS is a counterweight. It's meant to bring things back to a balanced center.
That's actually a really hopeful way of looking at it. It's
Yeah.
not about division, it's about democracy.
I think so. It's about making the global system more democratic by ensuring more voices are heard, more options are available. It just reflects the reality of the 21st century.
But doesn't this put South Africa in a tough spot? The source brings up this idea of breaking up with the West. The US and Europe are still massive trading partners. You can't just ghost them because you have new friends.
No, and the source argues you absolutely shouldn't. It's not an either-or situation. It's not a breakup. It's about diversification.
Right, there was a financial analogy for this, wasn't there?
Yes, and it's a great one. Think about your personal finances. You might have a savings account in your local currency. But a smart investor also has some money in another currency or another asset. You don't put all your eggs in one basket.
You spread the risk.
BRICS is a way for South Africa to spread its geopolitical risk. If Western economies struggle or if relationships there get tense, South Africa has these deep ties with the fastest growing economies in the global South. It's an insurance policy.
That makes perfect sense. You don't close your account at the old bank. You just open a new one across the street to get better rates. It's just business.
Exactly. It's about maximizing your options. It's pro-South Africa, not anti-West.
So if we zoom all the way out, we started with that terrifying image of being on the menu.
And we've kind of arrived at a place where we see nations building their own tables.
We've seen that BRICS isn't a military pact, it's a diplomatic forum. For South Africa, it's a gateway strategy that lets them punch above their weight.
And we've seen the practical side. The NDB funding real infrastructure and the move toward local currency trade to protect us from risk.
It really is a story of evolution, not revolution. It's the world adjusting to this new reality of multiple centers of gravity.
And that adjustment can be messy and slow. Remember the consensus model. But it is happening. The monopoly is over.
Before we sign off, though, I want to leave our listeners with something to chew on. We talked about BRICS being a plan B for the global financial system, a backup.
Right.
So here's the question that really struck me. If BRICS succeeds in creating a truly viable, robust Plan B system where nations can trade and grow without ever touching the old institutions, what happens to the stability of Plan A?
That is the critical question.
When nations no longer have to use the traditional Western systems, do those systems adapt? Or do they start to crack?
Well, if you lose your monopoly, you have to change your business model.
Right.
We're already seeing institutions like the IMF trying to tweak their voting rights to appease the global South. They feel the pressure.
So competition breeds competence, even in geopolitics.
One would hope, but it definitely brings change. No question about that.
Something to think about the next time you see a headline about a BRICS summit. It's not just a photo op, it's a shift in the tectonic plates of the global economy.
And we're all watching it happen in real time.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.